Got it.
Here we go. Speaking of never-ending stories, here we are, everybody. Hopefully it'll be entertaining like the movie. So, hey, welcome to today's special interest group for Scrum Masters. Yep. And here's our mission, folks. We connect people and foster professional growth through collaborative events, which educate our community on uncovering better ways to deliver value through Agile values, principles, and practices. So if you're interested in that, you're in the right place. Falcor! This is our 21-22 Agile Austin board. And then, yeah, attend a SIG meetup. We have all kinds of interesting special interest groups. You can check them out right here. You can check them out online. We are still looking for someone to be the leader of the product special interest group. So if you or someone you know would be a good fit, reach out. That'd be great. And we would love for you to join Agile Austin officially for the amazing sum of $35 as a yearly membership fee. You get Slack access, voting privileges, be a board member, end of the year party. You get to get bragging rights if you're part of it. So what's not to love?
That's awesome. The bragging rights is what put it over the top, really.
Right? I brag all the time. My husband's so tired of hearing about it. He's like, yes, I know you're part of. He's over it. Career opportunities. So if you know of a job opportunity, share the details in the chat and start with hashtag we're hiring. We would love to spread the wealth and get people in those jobs. And our upcoming Scrum Master SIGs. I was about to say we are in October. I mean, we're not, but we might as well be the way time is going by. October Scrum Metrics, that'll be our topic by Rajiv Hasari. And then in November, we have Agile Games on Discord, and that'll be with Amin Eftekar. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And then in December, you have your own special interest group about the holidays. So we will not be meeting, but I'm sure you'll be doing all kinds of fun stuff. Retrospective Radar, that is our topic today with our amazing host, presenter, Anthony Coppedge. He'll be covering how to use qualitative feedback in a quantitative way. I'm trying to pull up your bio. Here it is. Anthony is based out of Fort Worth, Texas, where he leads an agile transformation for digital sales. Where he leads the agile transformation for digital sales, sorry. And now he leads the discipline and scaling for all of agile marketing. So we are super excited to have him here as a host. And now I will pass it on to you, Anthony.
Thank you so much for having me, for everyone for having me, and good afternoon. I am going to be talking to you about qualitative feedback. What is that? Feedback. The idea that when we get verbatims, whether it's a retrospective or just an informal discussion, there's always an opportunity for feedback. And one of the things that I have seen in my experience is that feedback doesn't always lead to change. And when feedback consistently doesn't lead to change, you see morale decline, you see people kind of just give in to the way, and the culture just takes a dive. And so one of the things that I've been enmeshed with is in different companies and different cultures, why some teams seem to perform better than others, why some organizations seem to have harder time with that. And it came down to understanding that it wasn't as much of a process or system issue, it was a feedback issue. And so I have put a lot of time into this. And what I'm hoping that you'll take away from today is how you can go back to your teams using existing thinking that you may have, and then a new way of approaching feedback so that you can start to have those closest to the problem provide more of the insight that you need to have better outcomes for the future. And the people doing that work are those best suited to give us that pivot for strategy rather than just executives driving strategy. And so how do we do that? Well, I'm going to go through that today. A little background, and I'll be quick, is I was introduced to Agile at a software as a service company in 2009, where I was hired to be the director of communications. And as I walked around the building of about 100 people, I got to the development area, and they had this 60-foot wide, 10-foot tall whiteboard with a bunch of notes across it. And they were using, what do they call it? Like the little magnetized pawn pieces to hold the index cards on the wall. It was all color coded, and it was really impressive looking. I had no idea what I was looking at. So I asked, what's that? And they're like, well, that's our wall of work. Again, I was clueless. And so because communication needed to both communicate with existing users about what was coming and how we were addressing some of the bugs, fixes, etc., and we were also part of the marketing team to reach new leads, we were in a unique position of needing to know what to talk about and when. So I started attending some of the retrospectives. I started attending stand-ups to pay attention, just to observe, because the insight of where the products was heading and what we were going to release and what they were learning was incredibly valuable from a content standpoint of what we could then go share both with users and with new prospects. And it really introduced me to something impressive, which is I watched these teams deliver value consistently and at scale. And marketing didn't feel that way. Marketing felt like hair on fire and responding to sales and trying to get stuff out and hoping for the best. And it just always felt like everything was an emergency. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but that's a hard way to work. And so one of the things we did was we said, well, how do you do that? So I sat down with Lance Dacey, who now runs Big Agile, and he was the Scrum Master over there. And he walked me through the basics of Scrum. I didn't know anything about Agile, but he walked me through Scrum, and it was the idea of, okay, go take that and put it in marketing. And so we did. We had a cork board and yarn and swim lanes and all this fun stuff. And you know what? It for 6 months, we tried to pull that together, a little less than 6 months. And boy, crash and burn. And the difference was that in the software development, other than break fix, it was pretty head down. They were pretty good at estimating. They knew what they could deliver. And so they were very good at head down work. Our work had head down. We had an editorial calendar to release against, but a great percentage of the effort was responding to a lead or a sales request or a business partner. And so there was no way to estimate what we couldn't know. And what I was trying to do was square peg round hole and just didn't know it. Fast forward many years, and since learning about Lean, Kanban, Six Sigma, Prince, just go through the whole list. It's been fascinating to understand why there have been these different approaches following this kind of mindset shift that came around about 20 years ago. And what worked well for software doesn't work well everywhere else at face value. But what I have found is that the principles and values absolutely of agility apply. And so that's where we've taken a step back, reimagined, and moved forward. So today, I have shifted roles from the marketing side over into digital sales, where I lead the worldwide digital sales transformation for agility for IBM. And so I've got people in every continent, and what we're doing is working hard to say, how do we understand what's delivering the greatest value, and what do we do to remove the blockers of things that are not? Sound familiar? Right? So in a sales context, we're taking the principles and values and applying them, but the actual mechanics of it look a little bit different. So when I show you some things today and I put things on the screen, you may go, well, that's not Scrum. You're right. If I had to put a label on it, it would be kind of lean Scrum-bonish, but ultimately that's what we're about. So what I'm going to do is share my screen and just dive into the actual presentation since I'm done with the talking head part. Feel free to, by the way, and which screen are you seeing? Are you seeing the presenter view or the actual big screen with that says Retrospective Radar?
Looks like the presenter, yeah.
Okay, so you see the big screen, not the one that's a little preview. I want to make sure I'm on. Okay, so if you see the big screen, that's perfect. So let's go to the next slide. What we're going to do today is walk through how this happens. How many of you, just by show of hands, if you have your video up, how many of you are in a situation where the strategy for what you do comes from on high? Almost exclusively, or for the majority. Anybody, or thumbs up? Is that normal, where the feedback comes from on high? That the strategy comes from on high. That's pretty normal. It's kind of a leftover of the last century's work in command and control, right? Where you would have those at the top saying a top-down approach, and then there are the others who would say, well, we have some of a bottom-up approach. And I would say, well, why don't you just have infusion? Why don't we have both? And so what we're trying to do is get to a place where we can show how to adjust strategy. Because if the work we're doing is leading to good outputs, but not great outcomes, I wonder why we keep doing that. And so asking better questions is one of the greatest benefits of agility. Agile doesn't solve anything, but it addresses everything, or it makes everything addressable. And of course, there's things like psychological safety and, the culture of if you have fear or not, and what we can do to make those voices heard. We've got to work on that. But at a base level, one of the things I've seen is how do you get better strategy from those doing the work and those closest to the work, whether that is your implementation teams, your sales teams, your marketing teams, on-site client people, whatever. The bottom line is that those who are closest to the actual traction are the ones best suited to help us know how to pivot strategy. And the problem is not we don't know that. We don't scale that. And so what I'm going to try to show you today is how you scale feedback. So let's look at this screen just to kind of go through it quickly. Leadership comes up with a strategy and they roll it out. So then the people doing the work of that strategy experiment with it, measure how those experiments going, talk about and discuss their experience, and then maybe do some testing and pivoting, right? Then they have feedback from that. Well, part of the feedback is for the team itself. But the feedback that really leads to change isn't just for the team, it's back up the leadership chain, right? It's to the management and leaders. So that feedback can then be evaluated. We're on the bottom right now. And it can lead to new insights, which we can then adjust and roll out an updated strategy based on feedback. Rinse, repeat, right? So that leadership strategy cycle, I would love to have the word leadership removed, or for leadership to mean everybody. Because the strategy cycle is about how do you have better outcomes that benefit the client, whoever your client is, right? And then how do you execute against that and learn? So if we build a way, which is what we're talking about here, a way to get this, how do you scale this? I'm glad you asked, because that's what we're going to do with the rest of our time today. And you're going to be playing with me because I'm going to invite you to do something, but I got a couple of things to go through just real quick. One of my favorite things that one of my friends at IBM says, Andrew Burrows says, strategy cascades down so that feedback can flow up. So when the feedback flows up in the model that I just described, what you get is intentional strategy change by the people closest to it, not just from the C-suite, not just from an ivory tower. I like this quote from a guy named Andy Stanley. It says, we don't drift in good directions. We discipline and prioritize ourselves there. So how do you do that? With data. But there's two kinds of data. There's the quantitative, the stuff you're measuring, the numbers, but there's the qualitative. And that's what we're going to focus on today. How do we validate the quantitative with the qualitative, especially at scale? So then the second thing we do is we think about, well, what do you measure? I love this quote by Galileo, who said, measure what is measurable and make measurable what is not so. That second half is a little bit perplexing until you start understanding the thinking behind it, which of course I've done the research. And what it really could be stated this way: measure what's measurable and understand what's not measurable. So if you could know something was more like this and less like that, is that a number? Maybe, but it's probably more a direction. And if you look at the rate of change we're facing in society and the world in general today, there's two variables that we need to be paying attention to. What is the direction of the change we're observing, and what is the rate of that change? So if you understand the direction and rate of change, you can make meaningful decisions with that data, even though it's probably not going to be an exact number. Easiest example of this is a barometer. If you have a thermometer, I can tell you the temperature right now. But a barometer does have a number. It's the air pressure in millibars. The whole point of a barometer is not to measure at that moment. It's to measure over time and provide the direction of change of that measurement and the rate of change. And that's what lets us start doing things like predict if it's going to rain or not with some level of certainty, right? So we need barometers, not just thermometers. And a lot of the dashboards and a lot of the information radios that we have in our teams and in our organizations are very much purely lagging indicators and almost no leading indicators. And they're almost always looking at one set of numbers with no context, without qualitative feedback to validate it or disprove it. And anywhere we have a dissonance, we should ask a better question. And that's what we're trying to get to. So how do we do that? Well, you have to highlight that dissonance And then you have to represent the courageous feedback. And the goal here is to understand some dimensions. How are we performing? What is our clarity? What's the leadership take on this? What kind of culture and where are we? And if we try to understand that over time, the sum of those things is greater than any one of them as a measurement or as an understanding. And what we're trying to let people know is it's psychologically safe for them to tell us when something sucks. Because sucking less is winning. Sucking less is winning. It's if you suck less, that's awesome. One of the things as a metaphor, people, when I'm describing transformational work, is I will say it's kind of like you found yourself in a pit. And what tends to happen is you will ask me as your coach or as a leader, so what's the ladder? How do we get out of the pit? And what I'm going to tell you is I'm really not interested in a ladder. I'm first interested in you stop digging, right? So before we try to figure out how to get out of the hole, the first thing you do is stop making it worse. So if we stop sucking, that's actually like free. That's free winning. So I want to highlight where we see the numbers say this, but our feedback says this. Why are those so far apart? Well, if your teams are like any other teams I've ever worked with, you're going to have stuff that we're performing against, but they're not actually leading to the outcomes we desire, and yet we continue to do them. Why are we doing that? Let's talk about what the numbers say and what our feedback says, and let's start to close that gap and address, should we even do this thing that we must do, that we've always done? Because the chances are, no, you shouldn't. And you have to give them that ability to be seen, heard, and valued, and we want that to be highlighted in a safe way so that they're more courageous with their feedback. Excuse me. And there's lots of different ways to measure. I'm not going to go for the sake of time, but feedback then becomes essential. This is the thing where it's not nice to have, it's a must have. And I don't think that you're likely to be the exception to the rule, right? Likely your teams are pretty good at solving things for and with themselves. But how often do your teams share what they solved with 4 other teams or 12 other teams or 400 other teams? We don't have mechanisms in place to do that. So we reinvent wheels. We reinvent the same problems. Everybody comes to the same discoveries because we don't share. And so we need that to be a change. How do you get there? By capturing it. And so you have to visualize causality, not just correlation. Correlation says this and this. There's a chart, I didn't put it in the slide deck, but there's these 2 charts that I like to show that I overlay them. And it's really funny because they actually look really similar. Like they almost have exactly the same peaks and valleys. And one of those charts is the number of hit movies, the performance of movies of Nicolas Cage over a 10-year period. And then the other chart is the number of deaths by drowning in a swimming pool. They're not related, but the charts over a 10-year period happen to almost match up. That's correlation, but that's not causality, right? In either direction. So what we want to do is figure out the causality. And what we're trying to do is know, what do we need to change? And we do this frequently and at scale, we get better. And so systems thinking, design thinking, all that comes into place. What we're trying to get as, how do we get better together, not just apart? And not how does a team get better? That's good. How does the organization get better? That's better. That's what we want to accomplish. So in order to do that, I have put together an easy way to describe this. Not all work is equal. We know this is true. So what we have to figure out is what's the stuff that has the highest impact, and the impact has to be defined against your definition of done and what you're describing as a win as an outcome. And then we look at the work we're doing and we compare and contrast and go, of that work, is that high value, good value, low value? It's the first thing you ask. And then you say, how do you feel about that? Because we want the people doing the work to tell us the sentiment, the tone of that, because that's going to inform the prioritization. Not just did we complete something. The checkbox is not the point, or it shouldn't be the point, right? It's the outcome. So how do you get there? Well, you have your low hanging, obviously do it. You got your significant things, you have no choice, but it's a lot of effort. Or things that are low value and low impact, that's questionable value. And if it's high effort and low impact, guess what? We say no. We ruthlessly eliminate that because that's in the way of everything else. But a lot of teams don't have this kind of rubric, this kind of thinking, this kind of rigor to understand that their voice matters and they can tell us these things. So we want to make that safe. And then finally, I'll just get to the actual demonstration. So this is an overview of how to think about qualitative feedback in a quantitative way at scale. And this is the fastest way I know to do this, because what I want to do is dive in and show you some fun stuff and go play together. So before I do that, I'd like to pause and say that was a lot and I talk fast. So let's talk about if there's any questions. Let me stop sharing for a minute and pop back over to video. Any other thoughts? Any questions so far? Feel free to just open your mic or type in chat. I think I can see both.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Red.
So my experience, unfortunately, has been, management loves hearing feedback up to a point, and then they can promptly ignore it. I would love to hear your experience.
I don't think that's bad people. I think that's bad process, right? Because if until and unless you have a situation where someone demonstrates they just don't care and they're actively against you, I assume they just don't know. So I want to assume the best of those leaders. I don't want to just automatically throw them under the bus and go, they all suck and we should just get rid of them all. It's always a leadership issue. Well, everything does rise and fall in leadership. That's true. But why and the way we get there, I think, can be super healthy and helpful. One of the things that I would say to address that, Red, and for everybody is I will give an example. At a company, very large company I was at, I was working with a set of teams and the leaders were saying, we know about the problems they've told us. We already know. And I'm like, great. So what changed? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, oh, so for example, one of the big problems was two different CRMs. They had two different CRMs that they had to use for some, legacy reason, and they didn't sync. There was no API connection to make it seamless. So there was a manual export from one to Excel, clean the data up, and then do a manual import to another. And this was marketing. And I was like, why are we doing that? Well, that's just the way it is. Everybody knew it's a problem. And in fact, when you did surveys, people complained about this. But what we never did, what they had not done to that point, was actually measure what's the impact, how often does it happen, what's the total amount of time, how many people hours are involved, and what's the business opportunity. No one had ever done that. Everybody knew it was a problem. It was a common complaint. So what we did is we said, well, let's figure that out. What does it take? And then we started taking and measuring that. And guess what we found? It was millions and millions of dollars a month wasted. And some people would go, that's a CapEx. That's capital expenditure. I'm already paying them anyways, so I don't lose the money. But that's an excuse, because if I'm already paying you, then I want to pay you to do the best possible work that you can do. Paying you and saying I'm already paying for your time isn't enough. You have to say, but what is the delivery of value from that time? And how do they feel about that? And how motivated are they to deliver even more value, right? By not addressing the pain point, you're telling them it doesn't matter. Just get over it. And what you're essentially doing is saying waste is okay. No, it's not. So you want to ruthlessly eliminate that waste by making not a complaint, but a story, a narrative with data. So the first thing we have to do is start capturing, well, how do you know that? I'm about to show you, by the way, on the screen, Red, but it's a great introduction into that. Before I do that, are there other
another
questions?
question.
Sure, Michael.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry, Michael. I don't know this might get into it. A few weeks ago, I listened to an Adam Grant podcast where he had your word psychological safety, Amy Edinson, I think if I'm saying her name right.
Yeah, Amy Edmondson, phenomenal book she wrote. Yeah.
And what concerns me and what she said there is I agree with getting survey and getting information, but she says taking a survey is a sign of maybe not having psychological safety to begin with. So this is
right.
like we're right on the cusp line here of what the fellow question was. Readers take survey, but then that in itself is a communication in itself. So that's where I'm curious about that.
So we're going to dive right into both of those things. That's a perfect, you guys couldn't tee me up any better. So I'm so grateful. Thank you. Here's why. I think surveys have a place. They're useful. But if all you do is survey people, you get survey fatigue. And then you're going to get halo effects, right? Which means I'm going to tell you what you want to hear, or I'm not going to bother responding at all. And now the survey data is useless, or it's less useful. So I'm not a fan of using surveys frequently. I think surveys infrequently with the right kind of questions really do reveal quite a bit. And we've done quite a bit of that work here at IBM. So let me show you how I did this and solved this without surveys. I made it part of the workflow. I actually created a way for us to think about what would it look like for knowing what's working and what's not to be a normal part of every single week. So let me share my screen and show you how that happened. Let me pop over to here and we're going to start here. One of the things I did is I created a Trello board, this is sales, so just as a way to understand how we have the visibility and alignment. So this is an information radiator, right? What I didn't want was an information refrigerator. right? Which that's the thing where you go put stuff on, but no one ever bothers to look at it unless they happen to go walk by at the right time. It's not useful to make decisions. It's useful to remember a to-do list, maybe, right? I don't want information refrigerators. I want information radiators. And so we had to make it public, visible, and online all the time, always up. So what we did is we said, you manage yourself and your calendars and however you do your work, however you want. All we want to know is what is the alignment and prioritization of effort. So what you're looking at here is a basic Kanban board, which is representing that the team social contract, which is our way of saying we agree to behave together. By the way, no manager involved, right? This is a team agreement. And then we say, what are the targets? So in sales, we got quotas. And oh, by the way, in case one of you haven't thought about it yet, it's really challenging to introduce Agile into sales when you don't have a team of people who come together to build a product together. In fact, they're individually motivated and individually compensated. So how do you create a team? Good question. So what we did is we aligned them around what are the things that's in it for our business, and then what are the ways that we orient towards client centricity. And this was one of the biggest shifts. And I'm getting to your question right now. If we know that we're delivering value to the client, then anything we do that doesn't deliver value to the client is worth asking, why are we doing? And how do you know that? You align them. Check these out. These are just labels, right? So generating OI, that's opportunity identification, basically leads. Progressing a pipeline, that's pipeline, right? That's how you're moving through, et cetera. So all we did is we wanted to understand, where does the effort go? So by a color code alone, I can tell you where the focus is at. And what I'm not doing is inspecting the work. I'm seeking to understand. I want to know, why is that? Because I want to help you. So that psychological safety I'm creating by demonstrating that I'm not here to tell you what to do or to inspect your work and figure out where you're spending your time. Instead, I want to understand what's in your way and how do we help deliver value to the customer? How do we solve for our objectives and key results, our OKRs? Because if we do this, and we do this well and at scale, we will eventually hit all our targets and exceed them. Byproduct of being successful in delivering value is having a revenue target hit or exceeded. Profit's not the point, it's the byproduct. It's the natural thing. It's like when you think of your teams, if you're in Scrum, you think about speed increases. Is speed ever the point? No. Speed's a byproduct of optimizing well and prioritizing well. Same thing. So what I wanted to do is see, how do we get them to orient? Where does the work go? And what I want to point out is in the doing column, I wanted them to tell me, or in the done column in particular, I wanted to tell me, how do you feel about this work? Pure sentiment, right? Pure subjective viewpoint, no data, no number around this. Just how do you feel about it? I think this was really high value. That's just okay. And this was low value. I had one rule for this. You can only use high value if it benefits the end user, the client or the prospect. You cannot add high value if it benefits us but not them. Let's say we had training. Training is super valuable, but you could never put training as high value. Why? Because it didn't directly, immediately impact the client. Eventually it's indirect, sure. So what I was teaching them was, how do you prioritize work that delivers value to the client and prospects first? That was the first big shift. But by starting to capture this, and this is a demonstration board, right? I'd have lots and lots of cards on a team. But what we would get is this list, and then I could do an export and figure out what percentage across all the teams of the feedback of things that they got done, things they felt they had to do that was valuable to do. What percentage of those were high value, good value, low value? And Red and Michael, guess what? That's not a survey. That's a normal part of feedback of them telling us how they feel about the quality of that work and the quality of if they think that work's worth doing again. So that when they take it to a retrospective, now they have a different discussion. Now the retro is not, what did I do? It's not a stand and deliver. Now a retro is, what did I learn? What do I think about that? Can we discuss that? And what would we do differently? How do we just get that 1% better every single week? So it's not a survey. Are we surveying? Sure, but it's a normal part of the workflow. And what I have is data, because I can start to count these across, I had 26 teams when I started. So 26 teams giving me data is hundreds and hundreds of data points over weeks, every week. And I use that to say, hey, guess what, leaders? You know that they're in sales. Do you know that less than this small percent of sellers think that what they do is high value? They had no idea. Like, well, why would they think that? What a great question. What we're learning is this low value work they feel they have to do, but it's eating their ability, their time, their availability to go deliver high value. Well, why is that? Why are they doing that? Well, they feel they have to. Well, why do they feel that? What a great question. Let's go discover that. And over many, many months, what we're able to do is start peeling the onion back to get to root cause analysis and not deal with complaints as symptoms. This is the beginning of that wisdom that we had. What I needed to do was make that tangible. So how do you do that? Well, I built something for them. So we use Mural. Mural is an interactive kind of whiteboard tool. If you have Mural or if you have Miro, it's very similar. What we have is Mural. And what I did is I said, let's build a way for them to facilitate how they do retrospectives so that we can get feedback that leads to change. Here's where we're tying it all together. What I did is by having them self-survey, self-reflect, and capture that data, that then translated and came right in here. Because what you're looking at is a retrospective radar. And I'm just going to zoom in here to show you how it works. On the right are the three circles. If you are familiar with the circles of control, influence, and concern, please give me a thumbs up on the screen. I'd love to see if this is not, if it's brand new to you, do a thumbs down or something. If it's not new, thumbs up. Because this was like the baseline. I was teaching everybody, how do you manage you? How do you choose what's high value? How do you have that autonomy? Well, that goes in the circle of control. You control you. And then I showed them the idea that influence is something they might have it, but you know who really has it in an organization? Managers. So how does your manager have the influence? How can you leverage their visibility and their network and their reach? And then you know who else needs to hear about feedback? Our senior leaders do. Because they're setting strategy. So how do we help them with data? So I wanted to create that way. And then I heard about a guy named Pat Kua, who I reached out to, and he's a terrific guy. And he created this starfish for retrospectives. So his whole point was there are 5 options in life. You can start doing something, stop doing something, keep doing something, do more of or do less of. Those are your options. You have no more. And his point was, once you finished a retro, how would you prioritize? How would you choose the order in which you would choose to do or not do something? And how do you know? How would you weight that? Well, that's what this is. So people would drag their notes, their things into these 5 quadrants, and it became a way to self-prioritize. And I'm like, genius. It also helps me parse data for those not on the team. And let me show you what I did. So the retrospective area of it, just what you'd think of, right? And you could change your questions to however you want to do it. I'm using kind of what Diane and what Esther did with retrospectives. Basically, what went well or what delivered value, what did not go, what was low value, and how would we get better? Right? What would we change? And so this is normal. So what we were trying to get to though was, once you did that, how would you self-select? So I mashed up Pat Kua's retrospective starfish, and I put it on top of the circle of control, influence, concern. And then I gave him very specific feedback and instruction. And I said, this is what you can control. Yellow is what your manager can influence, and orange is what you would like the senior leadership to address. And I helped them even further by, you'll recognize this as a modified user story. Tell us what it is. Tell us why that's the case in your opinion, and what your ask is. What do you want changed? What do you want done? What do you want us to implement? What do you want us to stop doing? And what's cool is, because they put them into these segments, it's easy to understand this feedback. That's for the senior leadership to stop doing. This feedback, that's for our senior leadership to start doing. Right? So does this make sense? I mean, if this makes sense, thumbs up or open your mics, because this is kind of the crux of the whole thing. And I'm going to have you come play with me, where I'm going to invite you to play on this in a minute, but not just yet. So let me walk you through an example. This is the area that, refresh. That's weird. I must have had a lapse there. So what I would have them do is they would come into their retro by coming in and pre-populating from their Trello, right? Their done column in the blocker column. Kind of what went well, what's delivering value, what's not, etc. And they would grab a sticky note from up here, pull it down, and either paste from Trello or type something in. And the idea was to share so that we could discuss it as a team, and then you could, as a team, decide what you wanted to do different, either for yourself or for the team. And then we would tell them, okay, now what do you want to prioritize? And this is where the power came in, because here they would take that feedback and then either drag or copy it, depending on if they wanted to keep it over there, onto the respective area. So if you want to manage you, this is how you're going to manage you in the middle. And you would start doing this, stop doing that, etc. If you want your manager to do less of something, right here, That's where that goes. So it gave a parsing of the feedback. It wasn't just, I have feedback from my manager. I have 5 types of feedback from my manager. I have 5 types of feedback for senior leaders. And this made it much easier for us to report on. There are questions so far. We're about to play together. I'm about to share the link and you can jump in with me, but I just want to see if this makes sense. Any questions, any thoughts? I'm looking for the chat window. There we go. Where does the effort go? Here. So someone put that in there. Sherry put that in there. Sounds familiar.
I think there was one question earlier, Anthony, about what ingredients help people feel safe to deliver negative feedback.
You have to prove it over time. They don't believe it. You know, if you have a culture where feedback is not received well, or it's perceived not to be received well, it starts with your level. And the way I think about managing and leading teams is this. For my team, for me, and everybody below me, that's going to be my span of care. So if I'm an executive VP, I have a very large span of care. If I'm a product owner, I have a reasonably sized span of care. If I'm a Scrum Master, I have a much smaller span of care. But the point is, at every level of authority, you have some span of care. Notice I didn't say span of control. Span of care. You're more interested in who they are as humans and how you can help them be better humans than what they do. If you demonstrate that who they are is more important to you than what they do, you have the beginnings of building psychological safety. So it's always up to that level and below. And in any organization, you can't just force this. This is a choice. So what I want to do is demonstrate that that choice is beneficial. So how do I do it? It starts with me. So how do you create psychological safety? Demonstrate psychological safety. So at your level and below, that's where you start. People always ask, this is really hard to start. I'm in an enterprise. Yeah, we have 300,000 people. I get it, right? But where I start is always with me. As for me and my team, this is how it's going to be, because I am going to be that air cover. I'm going to demonstrate that psychological safety. We're about to play in Mural. I'm about to give you a link to go play with me. But before I do, let me show you something really fun. So this was up on the screen accidentally earlier. Remember all those teams who gave us that feedback every single week, and I have a retrospective radar now filled out with all those sticky notes? Well, guess what I get to do? I get to come in here and I take those, I was changing the color. This is how I did it, right? So if you want to see how this works, it's very simple. If it's purple, this purplish color, that's circle of control. That's not feedback, that's for them. I'm capturing it just to know what the N equals, how many of those there were. But if it's a shade of blue, it's which circle, which segment. So circle of influence stop doing is always this hex number. So I change the hex number. Let me show you right there. There's that deep blue, lighter blue. Lighter blue, lightest blue, deep orange, light orange, all the way around to yellow. And that way, when I did this, and I'm going to show you how I do it, if I highlight all the stickies in the radar, all of them are selected, and I right click in Mural and I choose download to CSV, guess what I get? Something awesome. I get the ability to export now the content from the card and the color of that card. So when I take it to this tool, I can import it in and I can say that card had this hex number in this text. Therefore, I know this text came from circle of control, stop doing. I know this text came from circle of influence, start doing. I know this one had circle of concern, less of. And I went from team member, manager, executive. And I know exactly. So it auto maps based on just some visual basic logic, right? And so we're able to then parse the data. So let me zoom in and show you the coolness of this, and then we'll dive in and have fun. So I can look at any team and I can see the performance of that team. So here's a team called Apps, and I can see the percentage of their feedback to senior leaders and the percentage of their feedback and the total number of sticky notes over X amount of time to their manager. And if I want to understand that for 2 teams, I can do that. 3 teams, I can do that. 4 teams, I can do that. Or if I just want to see them all, here's the overall performance of all these teams. And I can start to see as a proxy, circle of concern, by the way, the question is for the executive leadership. Circle of control is for the team member. That's what I meant there. So now I start to see by proxy, this team, for whatever reason, has very few sticky notes over 12 months or 6 months or whatever the date range is on this. This one had a lot more. Now, there might be a really good reason for that, but generally, you know what I find? The teams that are really bought in and really improving almost always map to this. So my low buy-in teams almost always have low amount of feedback. There's a lot of reasons of why that may be, and I don't ever use this to have shame or blame. This is just to go have questions and try to understand how do we help, right? But what we get is some sort of proxy, an understanding. And what I want to see over time is the number of feedback to managers going up and the number to senior leadership going down. Why? Because that would mean that the senior leaders are addressing it and the managers are getting more accomplished on behalf of the team, as a general rule of thumb. But here's what's really cool about this is I can show you the segment. Look at the highest segment of feedback for these teams. The vast majority of it says, please make the pain stop. That's what less of generally means, right? Please do less of this because it's just too painful. It's not working well. We need to do a lot less of this. But look at the second highest value. Start doing. Do you know what that tells me? Especially when you start reading through the comments. They're begging us to stop doing the dumb stuff and eliminate waste, and they have the ideas of what to do instead. The people closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. And by giving them a voice and a way to give us that feedback, we're able to start to say, yeah, your feedback can actually lead to change. How? Because we actually have, for each manager, for each Scrum Master, however you want to do it in your organization, you might have maybe 4 to 8 sticky notes a week for you. Maybe. It's just not that much, sometimes less. So it's pretty easy when we publish this to say each one of those leaders, go in and look at the feedback that was for you. So what they would do is they'd come up and they'd go, okay, this is my team. I am a manager, so I'm influence, and I'm the app team leader and influence is mine. Here's that data. And of course, I'm doing this over a long period of time, but let's say we just did it just for December. I had 4. That's pretty straightforward. And then I go in and I say, hey, that feedback is under consideration. I took that up to my boss, or I escalated that to so-and-so, or 2 of these ideas were great. I went to the product owners and we're going to do that. Or guess what? 2 of those you had ideas, we solved them that day. Like it was such a good idea. We just went and did it. It was so easy. Because most feedback is low-hanging fruit. Most feedback is little easy stuff. That's the little, but when you start solving for that, they feel seen, heard, and valued. So now one manager can manage this. That's a very easy thing to do, the low-hanging fruit. But the beauty is when I see the aggregate of it, when I see all the feedback for our senior leaders and the managers, and I start to see this, and by the way, this is published. So the team sees the vast majority of their feedbacks being acted upon and done. The vast majority. Guess what that does? 2 things. They give more feedback and they give better feedback because it matters. Because their voice matters. Because they feel seen, heard, and valued. Psychological safety visualized, right? We now are showing them what you say we take seriously. We can't solve everything. Some things are not done. We decline for any number of reasons. That's too technically difficult. We don't have enough, whatever, right? But what we're trying to figure out is, where does the effort need to go? What do you need? How do we support you? How do you tell us what you need? And this is key, because when you demonstrate that value to them, they give you more. It's remarkable. So when you show them the progress, they buy in. That's how you get there. And this took a while. Like this is over a year's worth of data, right? So this is a lot of work. And this is, I've genericized this for the sake of, keeping proprietary data, but this is all lorem ipsum. By the way, every bit of feedback of whatever was said, by which team that said it, on what date they said it, in which circle, in which segment, I have the actual verbatim here for all time. I have thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of feedback. You know what I did? I'll show you. I took that data and they would take their retrospectives and I would get that data and I'd take it to a natural language processing. We use Watson because we're IBM and why not? And I would analyze that and it would give me, this is just dummy data, right? It would give you keyword, emotion, sentiment, tone, syntax. And you know what you're getting is you're getting the ability to understand what are they saying the most. And then we start filtering this data, run it through a pivot table, start looking for patterns and trends and anti-patterns. And then we have data at scale. Now I have hundreds of pieces of feedback that I can start to make sense of, right? At scale, not the managers do, I do. Our team takes this and we look at it at scale and start saying, we know what the overall issues are. And I bring the executives together that are over these, the 6 or 7 executives together. And I go, did you know? And you know what? They normally just don't talk to each other because they got their own business unit they're busy with. But when you bring them together, like some very large percentage of the stuff applies to all of them. And so now we're solving once, not 4 times or 8 times. We're solving it, and we're addressing it at a level where they have both the proximity and the authority to go make those changes. So we're making it data, we're making a story, we have a narrative around why and what, so that they can go make a meaningful decision from meaningful data. This is game changer. Game changer. This is how you change strategy by the people closest to it, and this is how you do it at scale. All right, let's go ahead and put that link in, if you would, Jimena, into the chat, and you can all come play with me. So go ahead and click on that, but let's go ahead and open mics. I'm going to take as many questions as I have. I know we got like 10 minutes left, so we got 5 minutes to play. So go ahead and jump into the link there and have fun. You can see how it works for yourself, but I'd love to hear questions, comments, concerns, feedback from you. The floor is yours.
Hey, I've put the link in the chat, everyone, if you want to check it out.
Anybody want to open their mic and ask a question or
There's one
provide some
question in the
feedback?
chat about clarifying the circle of concern versus control once more.
Sure. So if it's in the circle of control, I, as a team member, I can manage myself. So if I grab a sticky note from up here and I said this was not working well, and then I edit that so you can, I'm on the screen so you can all see what I'm doing here, and I could say this webinar is too low yield.
You're not sharing your screen, just by the way.
No, I'm not sharing my screen, but I'm on the Retrospective Radar under what did not go well. You can zoom in by using your mouse to zoom in and out, or trackpad, and you can see that I just put this webinar is too, which webinar is I need to be more clear. This cloud webinar is too low yield, whatever it is. So, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thing, and in this case, I'm going to duplicate it because I want to leave it there for you to see. And I'm going to drag it, and I'm going to say I'm going to stop doing that. So circle of control is where that went. I just said to myself for next week, I'm not going to prioritize that. In fact, I'm going to stop doing that. So I just put it to stop doing circle of control. What's the control? What I can control. What's influence? What my manager can help with. What's concern? Orange on the outside, that salmon color. That's what senior leadership needs to be aware of. Those are like systemic issues, right? You know, our 2 CRMs, and that's a pain, and here's why it's a pain, and here's the opportunity cost, and here's the amount of time it takes. It's great to tell them that. They don't know that data. All they know is you complain about it. Well, we want data. How do we get data? We capture it. So this is how I solved not having polls and surveys all the time. I take your feedback and take qualitative feedback and quantify it. 82% of all teams are saying this thing. Holy crap. That's 424 people. That is weighty. That's very different than we have this problem. Yeah, we know about the problem. Did you know it cost us this many millions a month? No way. Well, actually, we know that now. How do we know that? We capture feedback at scale. Oh, you're capturing. I'll share my screen since someone's saying they're just still loading the mural. So what I was showing is that I put into what did not go well. This cloud webinar was too low yield. And then I took it over here into circle of control, which is for me, stop doing. So inside the teal, I'm telling myself for next week, I'm going to make sure that's not part of my workflow. And by manager sees this, right, or there's shared understanding, the team, we probably talked about this. There's real opportunity for us to share those learnings because a rising tide lifts all the boats, even in a team where it's individual compensation and individual motivation. Benefit of the team is phenomenal. Other questions, feedback, thoughts? I know I went fast today. It's a lot to cover. So did my best to do it as quick as possible. Feel free to open your mic.
I'm wondering if there's a way that we can direct people that might have more questions for you or might be more interested in this topic and discussing it.
Sure. You've got my email. You can just put it in the Slack channel, or the webinar channel, and you can, of course, share it after the fact. So people can email me or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to have conversation with folks.
Hi, Anthony. My name is Maria-Helen. I didn't get the colors things because it seems to me like it doesn't match with the circle. So the color may might be placed at any place. So could you please
Yeah.
re-explain the color to get
The color of the sticky notes is based on your preference. So if I have a team of 10 people, there's 10 colors of sticky notes, right? So if I want to be red, so I know which ones are mine, I grab red. If someone wants to be teal, they can grab teal. Someone wants to grab green, they can be green. That way you can see which one's yours. And then you drag yours over to the circles, and those circle colors are about which circles for which one. The internal, teal one is circle of control. That's what you as a team member can control. You don't need anybody's permission. Yellow is what you want your manager to influence, and orange is what you would like senior leadership to address.
This I get it, but the key for the report, so it's all about the color. This I don't
Yeah. Yes, right here. So I'm going to zoom into the screen. Do you see how right now the colors you chose for those sticky notes are up to you? So they don't match anything. But what I do, and I'm going to change screens here, is I go in after your team's done. I get this link
with yourself.
after and I go in and I change the color of these. This is manual, by the way, because any kind of MVP, minimum viable product, is always going to be manual. So we start with doing it manually. But the point is, I change these colors here and I say they're all this color. That way, that means it's all circle of control. It's all people. I change these to match this key right here, so that when I export it into Excel, it automatically imports. I know that text had to come from circle of concern, stop doing, for example.
Perfect, got it. That's the part I missed.
Sure, no problem. Great question. Any other feedback, questions, or concerns? Or ideas? Or high fives? I like high fives too. I'm not above that. Anybody? I know we're about out of time, so last question. What do y'all think? Is this something that you can see your teams using? By the way, this mural is going to be shared. I'm waiting for it to be published. Mural is going to publish this, so it's not just an IBM thing that I did. I have the Creative Commons license for it, so I'm giving them this mural to use as a master template, so everybody will have access to it. And I'd like the friends at Miro to do the same. Just a heads up.
Well, we want to thank you so much, Anthony. This was amazing. What a great opportunity to be able to discuss this and have you explain and show us all this great stuff. Well, thank you, everybody, for participating today.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, someone's asking a question, what's the circle of concern? If you, on the right-hand side of the mural, there's an outline. You can go to the how the radar works, and it'll show you that. Plus, the colors and all that is explained literally. So there's all the instructions you need are built into the mural. So those questions about how it works, literally all on this screen. There's even a getting started at the top of what to do and how to get started. So
thank you.
Thank you all.
Before we head out, just wanted to remind everyone that we are still doing the Keep Agile Austin conference this year. And that'll be Friday, November 5th. So check it out. Join us virtually.